Horror games have changed a lot over the last 20 years. Before the mid-90s, nobody really made horror games. When game studios eventually realized the market for them, we started getting real gems. Let me tell you, shit was whack. The games that were released in this time period all live on strong in the hearts of the players. I'm talking Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Eternal Darkness, and fucking Silent Hill 2. Today I want to talk about horror games spanning from the late 90s to the early 2000s, which to me personally is like the golden age of horror games. Maybe I've just been on an early 2000s nostalgia bias lately. I just rewatched the entire Spider-Man trilogy. I've been playing a little bit of Jak and Daxter because of my friend Vegas's amazing video, go watch it. Also, did you guys know movies when you're high are like 10, 100 billion times better than when you're sober? I watched Spider-Man 2 after smoking and I cried like 8 times. This ain't what the video's about. The first chapter in this video is what this video was originally going to be about. I was going to talk entirely about the atmosphere of these early games, but I decided I'd talk about everything about these games. Silent Hill 2 has one of the most interesting and eerie environments I've ever seen in any horror game. The constantly changing town with the horrific beings walking around, and the fact that it's caked in this thick layer of fog feels so familiar but so alienating at the same time. The fact that this game's signature look was originally created to cover up the limitations of the console at the time is just astonishing to me. This game has so many iconic locations and characters, which we'll get more into later, that just satisfies the senses more than any other game I've ever played. And for Silent Hill 3 and 4, they kind of flipped in favor of these gritty, rusted looking hellholes that seem to expand almost endlessly. You can't tell whether or not you've just been walking in circles or if these tunnels are just endlessly expanding. Silent Hill 4 also has an amazing apartment which sort of acts like your typical hub area, but it never feels safe. The front door is covered in chains preventing the player from escaping, which makes looking out the window even scarier because you can see life continuing as normal. The mansion in Resident Evil is so fucking perfect. I've been playing this game for years and I still don't understand this labyrinthian nightmare. The halls go on forever and the player is always trying to remember where the fuck they're going, and that's also due to this game's amazing fixed camera. The fixed camera is an idea that I've hated for a majority of my life, but I've recently come around to it. A reason Resident Evil is so scary is because it purposely takes control away from the player. You don't get to choose what you see, the game does, and that can lead to super interesting gameplay moments. You're constantly on edge because you never know what's coming just around the corner. This allows for super terrifying moments like the iconic cutscene of the zombie. Never knowing exactly what to expect keeps the player on edge at all times, and requires them to make smart decisions like, hey, if I look at this mirror that's conveniently placed in this corner, I can see the zombie before it's too late. Look at me, I deserve a fucking Scooby Snake. Arguably one of the most important things of any game is the gameplay, and all of these games are gems in their own way. Resident Evil has these infamous stiff controls that make you feel trapped, like you're not actually the one to control. And Silent Hill has these purposely jank-ass controls that can be attributed to the system at the time, but can also be seen as intentional considering you're a regular-ass dude with no combat experience, who wears pants made of fucking cardboard, and it all adds to the immersion. Resident Evil 4 is super well known for flipping the series on its head completely. It introduces a new control system which feels so much better to play. Sure, nowadays it feels kinda dated, but back in its prime it was revolutionary. I guarantee over-the-shoulder shooters would not be as commonplace now if this game hadn't started it. This game had a change in controls because the gameplay itself changed a lot. It's no longer a slow-paced game series. It's now focused on action and providing interesting gameplay moments, where the player has to think to themselves, it was hard to fight one chainsaw guy, but now there's 2 of them. Of course, this did eventually lead to the sudden dip in the series quality, as the action became way over the top and not nearly as fun, but Resident Evil 4 still deserves praise for keeping the series fresh. Kinda like how this series horror is fresh as fuck. That was a horrible transition. Resident Evil contains some of the most memorable horror in any franchise. It did the impossible. It made zombies actually scary again. These slow, shambling fucks seem unstoppable at times, and it's frankly terrifying to deal with them. You constantly have to wonder, should I run and hide like a little bitch? Or should I actually stay and fight? It also introduces various monsters like the giant snake or the little girl who's mutated into this really powerful beast. Up until a certain point in the game, you're just running around doing puzzles and collecting shit when this happens. Yeah, this completely breaks the balance of the game you've established at this point. By this point you might be used to the typical zombies, but now things have changed and you're once again super vulnerable, and it works so well. Resident Evil 4 makes the player feel super vulnerable as you're going up against a new enemy type, the villagers. These creepy fucks slowly stalk towards the player with their weapons in hands and they're grunting, and it's just so awesome. Also, some of them watch way too much hentai, that's all I'm gonna say. A shining example is the Clicker in Resident Evil 2. This seemingly invincible monster is known for making gamers piss all over themselves. It just proves that throwing things into the mix works if not too many things are thrown in, like in Resident Evil 6. Eternal Darkness also does it well, with doing things like pretending to turn the TV's volume down, or convincing the player that they've deleted their saved progress. Oh my god.
No. I deleted all my saved games. Oh. Yes. It got me. The game fucked with me.
It's great stuff, but not as good as Pyramid Head. For a good majority of Silent Hill 2, you're constantly on edge as the game constantly feels like it's building to something, and when that something is revealed, it's horrifying. Pyramid Head constantly stalks you throughout the game and cannot be killed. He forever looms over you like how the regret looms over the main character. Horror is basically meaningless if you don't have like a good narrative backing it. Because if there's not something compelling me to finish the game, then why would I want to? Why would I want to suffer through this pain and torment if there was no emotional payoff at the end? That's why it's important for games to make us care. They need to make us care about the plot, care about the characters, and most importantly, care to finish that shit. Resident Evil doesn't have the most insane story of all time, but the characters are well written and we care about them, and want to help them solve this mystery. Especially in Resident Evil 2. Leon and Claire are two of the most likable protagonists in gaming, and I want to see them survive. Sure, in Resident Evil 4, Leon is kind of a stiff piece of wood, but I still know him and care about him, because the series took the time to develop him and make me like him. And even if you don't know Leon that well and this is your first Resident Evil game like it was mine, you'll still enjoy it because the wacky ass story is so engaging. Silent Hill 2 kinda has the best of both worlds. The narrative they establish is mysterious and intriguing, and the characters are super interesting, like this girl who killed her own father after he abused her for her entire childhood, or this wacky fuck who's so insane he's killed a dog before. But most importantly, the main character James is super fucking interesting and flawed, but in a good way. As we play through this game and unravel the story, we also unravel who he is as a person and what happened in his past. We know that his wife is dead and he clearly regrets something about it, and that something is represented to us throughout the game via the nurse monsters or this hyper exaggerated version of his wife that he keeps seeing. It's all meant to represent his sexual urges during his wife's time in the hospital, and it's done so well. Cause whilst I think James is kind of a piece of shit, I also feel bad for him. Because you know deep down he regrets the way he acted. The town of Silent Hill is basically meant to be a personal hell for people. This dude just sees people laughing at him and encouraging him to do more violent shit, and this girl sees the town on fire, and lets her regret for killing her father consume her. I think the point of this game is not to let your past actions define you, and to learn how to move on from them. The real question for James isn't if he regrets what he did, it's if he plans to make up for what he did. And I think that's simply beautiful. I guess I'll end this video by saying that the games I covered today are kind of like the golden age of horror in my opinion. Sure, horror is still around and we have series like Resident Evil and Outlast that are going strong, but it's not the same as it used to be. A lot of big game studios have completely pulled the plug on horror, which makes us have to rely on the indie scene. which is also kind of a blessing in disguise because it allows for so many indie creators to share their ideas. I get the same feeling playing games like Cry Fear as I did playing Silent Hill 2, and that's really cool. In all, I think indie horror is really awesome, and I do plan to talk more about my favorite titles in the sequel to my Halloween special I did a year ago, which will come out this Halloween. But in all, I guess I'm just sad that horror is no longer as dominant as it used to be. Because even though games like Cry Fear and Outlast give me hope, they'll never really be able to live up to what I experienced in my youth. And when I realized that all I'm kind of left with at this point is the memories, it really bummed me the fuck out.